What if the real work of sobriety has nothing to do with alcohol? What if drinking was just the symptom and the real problem was self-abandonment, silencing your emotions, or performing a version of yourself that you were never really true to yourself? Today's guest has spent more than 23 years helping people navigate the part of sobriety no one talks about, the 90% that happens after you put the glass down. And what we're going to talk about might just change the way that you see your own journey forever. Stay with me.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Hi, friends. I'm Margie Schaller, your host, your cheerleader, your co-conspirator in telling the truth out loud. Before we dive into today's conversation, can I just ask a tiny favor? If this podcast has ever made you feel less alone or more understood or just a little bit more hopeful, would you please hit follow, like, or share? Because these conversations save lives, sometimes quietly and sometimes loudly, but you never need to know who might need to hear this message today. I'm so excited by today's guest. Veronica Valli has been continuously sober since May 2nd, 2000. For those of you doing the math, that's 25 years. She's a psychotherapist, a recovery coach, and the best-selling author of Soberful, Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol. She spent more than 23 years redefining recovery, shifting the focus from not drinking to what she calls emotional sobriety. Through her coaching and online programs and the Soberful podcast, she's helped thousands of people transform not just their relationship with alcohol, but their relationship with themselves. Veronica, I am so honored. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you've been sober for almost 25 years, which to me, I'm so happy to have somebody on the show who understands what it was like to get sober back then. But I don't want to start with the day that you quit. I want to go earlier. Who were you before sobriety? And what was the emotional landscape that you were living in that alcohol seemed to soothe or fix or quiet?
Yeah, I was, the best way to describe it was I was very lost. I was really lost in life, and I had lost myself. I had no, it's like I had no map. I was just lost, and alcohol was such a big part of my life from so very young. And it took up a lot of space and energy and time, and it fixed temporarily how I felt. And I just sort of went from one calamity to another. And I was always trying to run away from myself. I was always trying to find the thing that was going to fix me. And the thing that was going to fix me was something outside of myself. Like the right boyfriend, the right job, the right place to live. Like, I didn't even know what was wrong with me, let alone what I needed to fix me. So I was really, really lost and dying on the inside, which is why I got sober at 27. People say this to me a lot, like, oh, I wish I'd been like you, so insightful, you were so smart. I was none of those things. I was desperate. I was hanging on to my sanity by my fingernails. I was desperate. I did not want to stop drinking. I only did it because I was out of choices.
I so relate to that. I remember sitting on my porch one day and wondering, like, I'm pretty smart, but I can't seem to navigate this life thing. Like, I can't figure, how do people who aren't as smart as me navigate life? Like, I don't know what I have to do to figure these things out. I couldn't do it. And I also remember feeling same thing, careening from calamity to calamity, but there was sort of a pride in that of like, look at all these things in life that I can handle. But it was exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It is exhausting. It's an exhausting, hard way to live.
Yep. Okay, so you got sober because you didn't have any choices, you said. What was that moment like, and what happened? How did you proceed?
Well, the reason that I felt like I didn't have any choice was I had really bad anxiety and panic attacks, and I used alcohol for a long time to manage that anxiety. And it really was, I was really in a desperate place, desperate. I was completely desperate in how I felt. And I thought alcohol helped me. And I was looking for help to solve the anxiety and panic attacks for years, for a long time. And after I'd exhausted every avenue, like nothing worked, I finally came to, it's your drinking. Like, the drinking is making this worse. And so it was like, I've been to doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, like find the thing that's going to fix me. Because I thought the thing that was the problem was a rare mental health condition that nobody else had. And if I could fix that, then I'd be fine. And it started with the alcohol. It was the alcohol that needed. So once I understood that alcohol is fueling the anxiety and panic, it's making it so much worse. I wasn't happy about stopping drinking because I believed the lie. I believed that alcohol was the best way to have fun, excitement, belonging, connection, to relax and to reward yourself. And I was 27. So I thought I was giving up, never having fun again. So I was not happy about that, but I accepted the deal. If the deal on the table was, if you stop drinking, your anxiety and panic disorder will go away, I'll take that deal, because I'm fine. I'll be boring. I'm never going to go out again. I'll never dance, do anything fun ever again. But I'll take that deal, because I can't live with the anxiety and the panic. Like, it's just too awful. I just had to have this quiet, small life. So I, it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I felt devastated at having to give up so much. And of course, none of that was true. I mean, the true bit was my anxiety and panic attacks did go away, and all of that got so much better. But what I had to give up, I didn't give up anything. I realized that it was the opposite. The alcohol was taking all of those things, and sobriety gave them back.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm curious, like, I got sober first through a treatment center, and then I went to AA, and really that's all that was available to us back then.
Yeah.
But I was so embarrassed, frankly, about having to do all this that I told nobody. Like, my family knew, and that was it. And I remember that there was an AA meeting in this building where you parked in the back, but then you had to walk around front and up these stairs. And I would wait until the cars were moving on the street to go upstairs, because I didn't want to have anybody sitting at the stoplight turn and recognize me. Nobody in my professional life knew. And quite frankly, I didn't tell anybody in my professional life, like maybe 5 or 6 people, until I was 18 and a half years sober. Because I just was afraid. I mean, the stigma was real back then, right? So what was it like for you? What was your journey when you first got sober?
It was different back then. So I went to 12 steps as well, because there wasn't anything else. I didn't go to rehab because I didn't have any money. I went to the 12 steps and I threw myself into it. And then when I was about 18 months sober and I was a bit more on my feet, I had therapy and all of that kind of stuff. I didn't have a career. I just had jobs. So told my best friend. By that point, I had acquaintances and fair weather drinking friends. Right. So I was very much on my own. So I began to tell people probably after the year mark. I didn't feel shame, to be honest with you, because I felt relief, because I had spent so long not wondering what was wrong with me, that when I figured out that, and I've always related to the word alcoholic, that I was an alcoholic, I was like, fantastic. Now I know what the problem is, because there's a very, very clear solution. So it didn't bother me at all I use the word alcoholic, I hope I was an alcoholic, but I didn't shout it from the rooftops, just on a need to know basis. But then I trained as a psychotherapist, and I've only ever worked in addiction, and everybody pretty much who works in addiction is sober. So it never needed to be. But I do remember, so I did work in the UK. I worked in 12-step abstinence, but I also did some work in harm minimization with charities. And I didn't announce it. Like I just did kind of keep that part of my life, not secret, but just didn't announce it. Once you got to know me, after a short while, you would know I didn't drink, and you would probably ask why that was, again, because I was so young, and I would tell you, right? So I didn't purposely cover it up, but it was still, I think there's a lot of that AA ethos where it confused anonymity with secrecy. Yep. And so, and then, I don't know, I feel like it changed fairly early on for me. I because I worked in a world where it was an asset, not a detriment. I think I got asked to speak on like local TV and radio. They were doing a story about young female binge drinking, and someone recommended me as a recovered female binge drinker. And then I'd started getting lots of started getting on TV and the press in the UK whenever they needed a talking head to talk about, being a young person who got sober. So it was sort of, but this is all before the days of social media, Yeah. So I talked about it publicly, maybe I was 4 years sober, something like that.
Wow. That's really impressive. And so what kind of reactions did you get?
I've never had a bad reaction, ever. The only bad reaction I've ever had really is my mother. So like I've been in like the national all the national newspapers at UK at various points, magazines, that kind of stuff. And my mother had this huge conflict of being really proud, but really embarrassed and ashamed about what it was for. So I've never, ever had a bad reaction, because everybody struggles with something. So yeah. I'm also I've never looked like the stereotype of an alcoholic. I will sometimes throw in cocaine addict just to be kind of for a bit of fun, especially now I'm a mum, right? People, I just don't fit the stereotype. So, and we know, everybody knows somebody who's struggling with this problem. So I was just on it. I always came from a place of just being very assured and I'm recovered. It's not a problem. So I only ever got very positive feedback. And then, of course, inevitably people be like, can I talk to you about my husband or my brother? Or I've been worrying about my drinking as well. Yes. So I've never, ever had a negative reaction, to be honest.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. Now, I listened to your podcast, and the one on emotional sobriety just really, really struck me. And in there you said, it takes great effort for alcohol to become a problem. And then you say, well, what was the great promise that you receive after all that great effort? And then you flipped the script and you said that getting sober, stopping drinking, is just 10% of it. But 90% of it is emotional sobriety. So I want to go deep here, because to me, this is everything. How do you define emotional sobriety? And why do so many people get stuck when they focus just on the alcohol and not on the rest?
Yeah, sobriety is 10% not drinking and 90% emotional sobriety, because anybody can stop drinking. It's easy. Everybody's done it. Everybody who has had a problem with alcohol has stopped drinking for a day, a week, several weeks, a year. It's staying stopped that is the challenge. So I got to 3 years sober and I hit an emotional rock bottom. I was sort of doing the steps of a fashion. I thought I was doing all the things. But I was incapable of having a functioning, healthy romantic relationship. And at 3 years sober, it just destroyed me. I was completely insecure, needy, full of self-doubt, all of that kind of stuff. And I got another gift of desperation. And I did the work of emotional sobriety. So emotional sobriety, when we are emotionally sober, we feel comfortable in our own skin and we have mastery over our emotions. So I was the opposite of that. I still wasn't comfortable. I didn't like myself. I still was uncomfortable in myself. And I didn't have mastery over my emotions. I was like a little boat on the ocean without a rudder. They would just capsize me, right? So I was given this gift of desperation, which galvanized me to work really, really hard on myself. So emotional sobriety is simply tools and skills that we don't have. So it's about being able to manage your emotions in a healthy and constructive manner by having really good boundaries, by balancing your needs according to your circumstances, by being able to deal with activating events and resentments, by being able to manage fear, being able to communicate clearly in your relationships. It was simply life skills I didn't have. And once I practiced those life skills, and emotional sobriety is a practice, it's just like exercise, right? If you go to the gym for 6 months and you work out and you get fit and strong and flexible, right? If you then stop doing it after 6 months, don't expect to be fit and strong and flexible for the rest of your life, because you won't. You have to maintain that. So mental and emotional health is exactly the same. It's not that you go and you fix yourself and then off you go. We have to have practices that maintain our mental and emotional health, not just so we don't drink. That's one of the consequences. It means that you don't want to drink, but it also, what it means is you grow and develop as a human being. And a core part of the practices that we must have is a self-reflection practice. We must be able to reveal ourselves to ourselves and see when our behavior has got a little off track, when our thinking is a bit irrational, when we're being fueled by irrational beliefs, all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I teach my clients is how to be able to kind of get under the bonnet, really under the hood, and see like, oh, that's why you're getting an outcome you don't want. That's why that's happening in your life. And that's something we have to do forever.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you that, my first drink was at 8 years old, but I started binge drinking, teenage drinking at around 13. And people always say that your emotional development stops when you start drinking. And I had a mother who was an alcoholic. And so the lack of clarity and the lack of consistency and the consistency was chaos, meant that I just didn't have any of those tools. And so after a couple of years sober, when I was trying to, take the next steps, somebody handed me this emotions wheel. And there was a bullseye with 4 things, and then there was a second layer, and then there was a third layer. And they said, when you're feeling one of the emotions on the outside, follow the path in to see what's at the core. Well, Veronica, I couldn't even identify what I was feeling.
Yeah.
Like I would look at these things and I'd be like, am I surprised or am I anxious? I don't know. I don't know what my emotions are, because all of that had been stunted. And quite frankly, my mom would tell me I didn't feel the way that I felt.
Yes. Yeah. And our emotions are a guidance system. Like it's like getting in a plane and not using the navigation system and going, right, I'm going to fly to Russia, and ignoring all of the beeps and things and information on the navigation system and flying because you think Russia's that way, but ending up in China and going, how did that happen? Right? Our emotions are how we fly the plane. They're just a navigation system. But most of us grew up in situations, a lot of us, where we weren't taught to learn to use our navigation system, and it wasn't role modeled for us. And I was the same. I grew up in a family, very British family, where your feelings are just unacceptable to us. Like, we just be nice. That's it. Right. And I have very big feelings, and I come from like the most stereotyped British suppressed emotion. Like everyone's in this like just very tiny range, and I'm in this like, and I got messaging. Yeah, I got messaging that my emotions were unacceptable, and you just have to push them down, right? And then we discover alcohol, and that just like keeps it pushed down.
Mm-hmm. And then my next journey was, like so many people say, alcohol wasn't really the problem. It was the symptom for me. And for me, it was the symptom of this really broken inner self. And so I discovered Adult Children of Alcoholics, ACA, and I spent the past, 15 years really unpacking and looking at. And one of the phrases that I love so much from that is that there are things that no longer serve us.
Mm.
And I think that coupled with this, like learning to identify what are my emotions and where do they come from? And is this old tapes or is this actually in response to the current situation? Somebody might say something and I just am infuriated. But when I unpack that and I look at it and I'm like, what they said was not cool, but the infuriation comes from this past message I was given. And so can I react to the not cool without, coming at them? Is that part of what you are talking about with this emotional sobriety?
Yeah, it's really about knowing ourselves, isn't it? It's about what one of the philosophers says: a life lived unexamined is not a life worth living. It's about when I was drinking, I was so disconnected from myself, so disconnected. I had no idea how I felt. I had no idea about anything. Sobriety is the journey back to yourself, right? When we have an alcohol problem, we leave ourselves by degrees. Mm-hmm. And it's the behavior, what we say, we do things like, a little white lie, like, oh, I ate something last night, but really you're hungover. What's the big deal if it's just one thing? But it's not. It's like this daily, we leave ourselves. We go so off course with our value system, our moral core. And then one day we wake up and we don't recognize who we've become because we're so far away from who we really are. I became someone I was shallow, I was manipulative, I was dishonest, I lied, I cheated. That is not who I am. Sobriety, and the thing is, once you realize that about yourself, it's very painful. So we need more alcohol to numb that pain. So sobriety is the journey back to yourself, and it's back to getting into alignment with who you really are. And to get in alignment with who you really are, we have to learn how to use our emotional navigation system. It's a core life skill.
I remember early days, people said that it was a return to sanity. Mm. And because I started so young, like I never had that experience. I lived up in insanity. I grew up in insanity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I didn't know what was right or wrong. How do people, what do you recommend is the way to, quote, return to yourself when you never had yourself in the first place?
I think at some point we always did, even if we were babies, right? Children are without guile. When we were very little, there was something, no matter how young, and then life circumstances, certainly if you have an alcoholic mother, begins to shape us. But I think that's really a spiritual belief that, about our core essence, that we are all born with capacity to be good people and whole and moral and all of that kind of stuff. And then life gets in the way of that. That's what we're returning to.
Yeah, I've done a lot of inner child work, and really the first couple of 5 years was just reassuring my inner child that it was safe. Like she did not want to reveal herself to me because it had been so unsafe for so long. And it sounds very woo-woo, but really that's kind of the work I've had to do.
It's 100%. That's a big part of the work of emotional sobriety, is because a lot of us are stuck in our responses to the world are from child, right? Even though we're adults, our responses are from child. So one of the first things that we have to do is to create safety for ourselves. And I felt like I lived on quicksand because I grew up with my father abandoned us when I was 5 and my mother's autistic. So I was about 10 when I had this sort of realization that my parents had no idea what they were doing. Like I just kind of, I have 2 boys, and it's like when you are a parent, you are solid rocks for your kids, right? You are solid. You are the North Star they orientate around. You are solid. And I remember just having this feeling like my mum doesn't have a clue. Like she do all these bizarre things because of her autism. I'm like, she doesn't know what she's doing. What? That's not. And so it was internally, it didn't feel safe because I knew I was living with an adult who was just clueless about life. And I'm 10. If you're the adult and you're clueless, I'm clueless. And so it feels really unsafe. And that feeling of not being safe, like that was definitely one of my biggest drivers. I was always trying to create safety. And I was trying to do it. I would try and do that in relationships. And we have to do that internally, right? We have to create, we have to be able to anchor ourselves and create safety. That's such an important part of emotional sobriety.
Now, I want to take the flip side, which is that I've talked to numerous people who said, I just drank because it was cool. I drank because that's what everybody was doing. And then in my career, like I was in sales or I was in, whatever the industry is where drinking was the deal. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. But I didn't really have any emotional damaging stuff as a kid. What would you say to those people?
So it doesn't, I think that you have some people who grow up and they've had real trauma or that kind of stuff when they were young. And it's sort of quite clear, like your story sounds like it's quite clear. Not everybody goes on to have an addiction problem, but a lot do. So when we are children, we have 2 primary needs that must be met. One is for attachment and the other is for authenticity. And we understand at a primal level as very small children and as infants that the adults around us must attach to us for us to survive, because we won't survive without it. Even newborn babies, everything about a newborn baby is designed for you to be attached and fall in love with it. So you help it survive. The need for attachment will overrule the need for authenticity. So what often happens is maybe we grow up in a family, I don't know, there could be various examples, but maybe you grew up in a family and they all love sport and hunting and fishing and out, and you don't. You love reading and being inside and all of that kind of stuff. And you would have been given a lot of messages that there's something kind of bit wrong with you because we're like that. And because all we know is our family, right? Our family is truth. That's how we think. It's not until we venture out when we're older, we're like, oh, other people do it differently, right? So in various different ways, a lot of us have had to compromise our authenticity. That's what happened with me, is I felt my authentic self wasn't acceptable within my family of origin. And what's really interesting, so I grew up in a very low income area in poverty. And I went to a school that was probably quite rough. And all my peer group, like the girls I hung around with, what they cared about was makeup and boys and pop music. And I actually liked those things, but I also loved musicals and I loved reading. And I was interested in all of those other things. And it was really clear in my peer group from very young that there was a big part of me that was not acceptable. So I had to hide it and pretend. So that it's compromise, because you need attachment to a peer group. So I think that is where the problem stems from, is that then we get into adulthood and we're so used to burying our authentic selves that we lose ourselves.
That is so well said. And as you said that, I just kind of was thinking back to some of these stories and their descriptions of what happened after they got sober.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to look like a problem for it still to be something about ourselves is buried or missing or stunted.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most classic examples of that would be, for example, particularly in our age group, is somebody who grew up in a family or community and they were gay. And that was not acceptable in their family or their community, right? So that was their authentic self, but they had to bury that and hide that because it wasn't. And also, that would have been very linked to attachment and survival, right? If this got kind of found out, they would be pushed out of the tribe. And we have these primal, we need other people in order to survive. That goes back, hundreds of thousands of years. So that's like a very classic example of someone having to hide something about their authentic self. And lots of people go through many years until they can create the safety to be authentic. And there is quite a high rate of addiction within the gay community. And I think that's a big reason for it.
So what was one of the biggest surprises that you found out about yourself as you did this work?
God, everything. That's a lot of it, I'm 50, almost 53 now. So I've changed. You grow and develop so much as a person. I remember someone saying this to me once and it really shocked me. And I can't remember, I've been sober a while. And they said, Veronica, I think you're quite scary sometimes because you're so confident. And I was like, you could have just knocked me over because I had felt my whole life really, really frightened and really scared of what other people thought about me and that I wasn't good enough. And I was like, it was the first time that I was like, there's such a mismatch in how I perceive myself and how others perceive me. I feel that that's now like congruent. Like I do feel like confident. I do feel like I'm a confident, anchored person. There's just so much. You never stop discovering all these new things about yourself. I used to think I used to be a party girl and be out all night. And then I discovered I'm complete opposite. I like to go to bed early and get up early. So just, it's all things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think for me, one of the things that I discovered later on in my sober journey is that I love creativity. I thought I was the least creative person ever. I was a math major in college. Like I really thought I was not creative. And now I love all things creative. I love painting. I love crafting. I love gardening. So who knew? Who knew that was in me?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And so much about that is about getting your bandwidths back, right? When we have an alcohol problem, we sacrifice our bandwidth, which is energy and space to think thoughts. And I sacrifice 50% of my bandwidth to alcohol, right? Drinking, thinking about not drinking, recovering from drinking. Like that took a lot of bandwidth. So a lot of it is you just don't have the bandwidth. You have enough bandwidth to make some money, deal with the things in life you have to deal with, but you don't have bandwidth to grow and explore and be someone who likes to garden and paint and all that kind of stuff. You just don't have the bandwidth.
1,000%. So I want to ask you as we kind of come to a close, if somebody's listening today who feels like they've tried everything and they're still stuck, whether they're sober or not, they just feel stuck. What do you want them to know about what's actually possible?
Well, when someone says they've tried everything and it hasn't worked, that's not true. The one thing that they haven't tried is consistency. Consistency is what works. And what the reason a lot of people fail is we do intensity over consistency, right? We join a program, we do a thing, we stop drinking, get all the podcasts, get all the books, get all the things, and we're like all about it for a few weeks or a few months. And then we feel a bit better. And then we stop doing all of the things that worked. So it is just like I said, it's physical exercise. If you were consistently worked out for 6 months, at the end of 6 months, you'll see a difference, feel a difference, notice a difference. You will be fitter, stronger, more flexible. But if you stop doing that consistently, a year later, you won't have those things. So we have to have a practice. like exercise is a practice, right? Because over the years it changes what we do and that kind of stuff, but you're consistent in it. So we need a sobriety practice, an emotional sobriety practice. So the missing ingredient, the secret sauce, is consistency.
And what do you offer that helps people with that?
So I teach people that practice. So I teach people what I did, what I'm trained in, what I've done with thousands of people. I teach them how to put together a practice that grounds them in sobriety, that enables them to identify irrational thinking and belief systems that lead to consequences and outcomes that they don't want, so that they can change that. They can change the belief. If you change your belief system, you'll change your outcomes, and that how they can practice that for the rest of their lives.
So we're going to put all the contact in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to discover you?
So if you just put my name into the internet, I'm on social media, Veronica Valli, spelt with an I, like Frankie Valli. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have a website, veronicavalli.com. So yeah, if you just search for me, I should pop up in lots of places.
Fantastic. Well, Veronica, this conversation has been a gift. There's something that's going to stay with me, that sobriety isn't the finish line. It's actually like the doorway. And I'm struck by how many of us, myself included, went into sobriety just trying to fix a behavior and ended up reclaiming our entire identity. To everyone listening here, here's what I'm thinking about. Where are you emotionally sober? But where are you emotionally starving? What are you still drinking at, even if alcohol isn't part of the picture anymore? And what would happen if you stopped running from your feelings and started trusting yourself with them? If today stirred something in you, honor that and just let it land. And before you go, I want to thank you again so much, Veronica, for coming on. For those of you listening to the podcast, if this conversation moved you, please take the time to just subscribe or like or share this podcast so that others can find their way to this really special place. I'll see you all next week.